Ethan Ward had never imagined standing before the throne of an alien empire. He had been a simple explorer, a human with curiosity stronger than fear. His ship, Endeavor, had wandered too far from familiar space. A sudden malfunction in its navigation system had forced him to enter uncharted territory, and before long he was caught by patrol ships of the mighty Zetherian Empire. The Empire was ancient, with technology far beyond anything Earth could produce. Their ships were sleek, their weapons terrifying, and their sense of pride unshakable. To them, humans were a young species, barely beginning to crawl into the stars. And now Ethan was their prisoner, brought in chains to the heart of their domain. The Palace of Zetheria was unlike anything he had ever seen. Towers of silver and crystal rose into the skies, glowing with light from within. The air shimmered with energy fields, and the halls were lined with alien guards in radiant armor. Their eyes, sharp and glowing, watched Ethan as if he were an insect that had wandered into a holy temple. When the guards led him into the throne room, Ethan had to catch his breath. The chamber was massive, its ceiling so high, it seemed to touch the stars themselves. Colored glass panels shone with shifting lights, and every step on the polished floor echoed loudly. At the center, on a throne carved from living crystal, sat Queen Seraphira. She was tall, elegant, and radiant in a way no human words could fully describe. Her skin shimmered faintly, as though touched by starlight. Her eyes, deep violet with a faint glow, seemed to pierce straight into the soul of anyone she looked. At her presence was commanding yet strangely calm, a mixture of royalty and mystery. Around her stood the royal court, counselors, generals, scholars, and nobles. They wore flowing robes adorned with patterns that spoke of status and power. Their faces showed pride. But when Ethan entered, that pride twisted into disdain. "A human?" one noble whispered loudly enough for many to hear. "A fragile species. Why waste the queen's time?" another scoffed. "This is an insult to the court," a general muttered, his armored hand tightening on his staff. Ethan heard every word, though he kept his face still. He knew he was the outsider here. If he showed fear, they would mock him. If he showed arrogance, they would crush him. So he stood quietly, shoulders straight, eyes forward, even though inside his heart raced. The queen raised her hand, and silence filled the chamber. Her voice, soft yet carrying power, spoke. "Bring him forward." The guards pushed Ethan gently until he stood at the foot of the throne. He expected accusations, maybe even a sentence. He expected to be questioned about Earth, about humanity's strength, or about why he dared cross into their sacred space. Instead, the queen studied him for a long moment. The silence stretched, and Ethan felt the weight of 100 alien eyes on him. Finally, she spoke words that no one could have predicted. "Human," she said slowly, her voice echoing through the chamber. "I want you as my husband." The room exploded in gasps, shouts, and disbelief. "What madness is this?" cried a counselor with golden markings across his forehead. "A human as consort to our queen? Impossible," shouted another. "This is blasphemy against our traditions," hissed an elder scholar. The generals growled, their armor rattling as they shifted angrily. Ethan stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what he had just heard. Did she really say that? Husband? His heart pounded so hard he thought they might hear it. He had expected judgment, not this. The queen did not flinch. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes locked onto Ethan's. "Yes," she repeated, her tone calm but unshakable. "I choose him." The court was in chaos. Nobles shouted over one another, some demanding explanations, others calling for Ethan's execution to end what they saw as humiliation. Ethan, still in disbelief, finally managed to speak. His voice came out rough, unsteady. "Your Majesty, I don't understand." Queen Seraphira's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "You will," she said softly. The head counselor, a tall figure draped in blue robes, stepped forward and bowed deeply to her before turning to face the court. His voice was sharp and commanding. "Silence," The echoes of his command rolled through the chamber, forcing the nobles to lower their voices. He turned back to the queen. "Your Majesty, forgive me, but this decision cannot be accepted. Without reason. He is human, an untested species. To tie the crown of Zetheria to him would disgrace our empire." Many nodded in agreement. Some glared at Ethan with open hatred. The queen rose from her throne, her presence towering over them all. "Do you doubt my judgment?" she asked. The counselor hesitated, bowing his head. "Never, my queen. But the court cannot ignore tradition. If he is to be considered, he must prove his worth." The queen's gaze returned to Ethan, her eyes filled with both challenge and something else, something almost gentle. "Then let him prove it." The court erupted again, but this time their words were about trials, tests, and the impossible challenges no human could survive. Ethan listened, his throat dry, his mind spinning. He wanted to protest, to say he had no idea what was happening, that he never asked for this. But when he looked at the queen's face, calm and resolute, something stopped him. She had chosen him, for reasons he could not understand. To back away now would not only shame himself, but might even put her at risk. So instead he took a deep breath and said, "If there are trials, I'll face them." The words hung in the air, shocking the court into silence once again. The queen's eyes softened for just a moment, and she gave a small nod. "So be it," she said. And thus began a storm that would shake the empire of Zetheria, all because a human had been bold enough to stand tall before a queen, and because that queen had spoken the unthinkable, "Human, I want you as my husband." The throne room still shook with the weight of Queen Seraphira's words. The echoes of her voice lingered in the vast chamber like thunder, refusing to fade. Ethan stood frozen at the foot of her throne, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst through his chest. He had expected judgment. He had expected chains, maybe exile or worse. What he had not expected was a queen of an empire declaring, before all her nobles, that she wanted him as her husband. The court was in chaos. Nobles shouted. Generals slammed their staffs against the polished crystal floor. Scholars argued in heated tones, their long robes swishing as they moved. Words like impossible, outrage, and disgrace echoed across the room. The queen remained calm. Her tall figure stood unshaken by the storm around her. Her violet eyes stayed, fixed on Ethan, as if she had spoken only for him and no one else mattered. Finally, the head counselor raised his voice, trying to restore order. "Silence." His voice rang clear, and slowly the noise of the chamber died down. He turned toward the throne and bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, the court lives to serve you. But this choice—" He paused, as if the words were difficult to speak. "This choice cannot be accepted without trial. Our traditions demand proof. If this human is to even be considered worthy of your presence, he must face the tests." A murmur of agreement rippled through the court. Some nodded eagerly, already imagining the human's failure. Others smirked, sure that the trials would destroy him. Ethan frowned. He had no idea what they meant by tests, but the way the nobles smiled made it clear these trials were not meant for mercy. Queen Seraphira spoke, her tone calm but firm. "Very well. If tradition demands proof, then proof shall be given. He will face the trials of worthiness." The court roared with approval, though Ethan thought he saw more hunger than fairness in their faces. It was as though they were waiting for a spectacle, a human crushed under the weight of their impossible challenges. The queen turned her eyes to Ethan. "Do you accept?" He wanted to scream that he had no choice. He wanted to tell her that he was only a lost explorer, not a hero. But when he looked into her eyes, steady and bright like twin stars, he felt something stir inside him. She had spoken for him in front of all these powerful beings. To refuse now would not only shame himself but might make her look weak. So he swallowed hard and answered, "I accept." The court fell silent for a heartbeat, as if shocked by his courage. Then the chamber filled, with noise again, disbelief, laughter, even anger. "A foolish man," one noble sneered. "He will not survive the first test." muttered a general. Perhaps it will be entertaining, said another with a cruel smile. But Queen Seraphira's gaze softened just slightly. Then it is decided, she declared. The trials begin at dawn, the chamber of waiting, after the court dismissed. Guards escorted Ethan to a chamber within the palace. Unlike the throne room's brilliance, this room was plain. The walls glowed faintly with silver light, and the air smelled of strange herbs. A single bed, a table, and a basin of water were all that greeted him. As the heavy doors closed behind him, Ethan finally let out the breath he had been holding. He sat on the edge of the bed, burying his face in his hands. What just happened? He thought. I was supposed to be a prisoner, not a husband, not a challenger in some alien test. The image of the Queen's eyes returned to his mind. Calm, strong, but not unkind. Why had she chosen him? She barely knew him. He was human, fragile compared to her people. There had to be some reason she had not explained yet. A sound at the door interrupted his thoughts. A figure entered quietly. A tall alien woman dressed in white robes. Her features were softer than the armored guards, her eyes glowing faint, blue. She carried a small tray with food unlike anything Ethan had seen before. Glowing fruits, a steaming bowl of thick liquid, and bread-like slices that shimmered faintly. The Queen sends this, the woman said softly. Her voice was smooth, almost musical. She wishes for you to eat and regain your strength. Ethan nodded, still unsure if he could trust anyone here. Thank you. The woman set the tray down and lingered for a moment. She studied him with quiet curiosity. You are different, she said at last. I've heard that a lot today, Ethan muttered. She tilted her head, as though she had not fully understood his tone. Different can mean weakness, she said carefully. But it can also mean strength. Tomorrow you will need both. Before Ethan could ask more, she bowed and slipped out of the chamber, leaving him alone with his thoughts once again. Dawn of the first trial. The next morning, Ethan was led from his chamber to a vast hall unlike anything he had seen before. It was called the Hall of Trials, a sacred place where the Empire tested champions, challengers, and sometimes criminals. The court had gathered once again, their robes flowing like rivers of color. Generals stood in armor, their faces hard. Scholars scribbled on glowing tablets, recording every detail. The Queen sat on a raised throne at the far end of the hall, her violet eyes never leaving Ethan. The head counselor stepped forward. Human Ethan Ward, he declared loudly, his voice echoing against the towering walls. Today you face the first of 3 trials, the trial of the mind. Before you lies a puzzle created by our ancestors, a puzzle no noble has solved in 3 centuries. If you can unlock it, you may continue. If you fail, he paused, and though he did not say the word, Ethan understood. Failure meant death. Guards brought forward a box. It was no ordinary box. It shimmered with moving patterns, its surface alive with shifting symbols that rearranged themselves as though they were alive. Lines of light twisted across it, forming mazes that vanished and reappeared. The nobles chuckled. Some shook their heads. A puzzle unsolved for 300 years, and they expected a human to do it. Ethan studied the box as it was placed before him on a pedestal. His hands twitched nervously at his sides. He had no special powers, no great wisdom, he was just him. But as he leaned closer, something caught his eye. The patterns, though alien, reminded him of something familiar. The navigation systems, back on Earth, the maps he had studied when learning to pilot his ship. The lines were not random, they were paths. Slowly, carefully, Ethan reached out and touched the surface. The box shifted, glowing brighter. The court murmured. Minutes passed. As Ethan traced the lines, connecting shapes, ignoring the mocking whispers behind him. His mind focused, shutting out the noise, the fear, even the Queen's gaze. Then, with a final press of his finger, the box gave a sharp click. The glowing lines froze, and the box unfolded like petals of a flower. At its center lay a crystal, glowing with pure light. The hall gasped. Nobles leapt to their feet. Generals stared in disbelief. Scholars dropped their tablets. The puzzle, one whispered. He solved it. It cannot be, another cried. The counselor's eyes widened in shock. Impossible. Ethan stepped back, breathing hard. He had no idea how he had done. It only that his human logic, simple, direct, had somehow worked where centuries of alien wisdom had failed. Queen Seraphira rose slowly, her face calm, but her eyes shining with pride. The first trial, she declared, is complete. The hall filled with noise once again. Some shouted in anger, others whispered in awe. But all of them now looked at Ethan with new eyes, not just as a human, but as something else. Something they had not expected. The court did not rest after Ethan's surprising victory. Word of the human who had solved the ancient puzzle spread through the palace like fire through dry grass. Some nobles whispered that perhaps fate had touched him. Others hissed that it was nothing but luck, and luck would soon abandon him. But there were some who saw Ethan as more than just a threat to their pride. They saw him as a danger to their power. If the queen truly intended to raise a human to stand at her side, it would change the balance of the empire. Many nobles, hungry for control, could not allow that to happen. So while the queen prepared for the next trial, a secret gathering formed in the shadows of the palace. Nobles cloaked in dark robes sat around a glowing table. Their voices were low, but their anger burned hot. "This cannot continue," one growled. "The queen humiliates us before the court. A human consort? Unthinkable. If she insists, then she is unfit to rule. Do not speak treason here," another warned, though his eyes glowed with the same desire. But perhaps the problem can solve itself. If the human does not survive the next trial, the queen cannot save him. And if fate does not destroy him, the speaker's voice dropped lower, sharper. "We will." The arena of steel. The next dawn, Ethan was led to a new place, the arena of steel. Unlike the hall of puzzles, this was a place of battle. The ground was made of smooth black stone, and above it rose tiers of seats where nobles and generals gathered, eager for blood and spectacle. The air rang with the sound of drums as the court assembled. The queen sat in a high balcony, her violet eyes steady, her hands folded before her. The head counselor's voice boomed across the arena. "Ethan Ward, human of Earth, today you face the second trial, the trial of bravery. In this test you must survive combat against chosen warriors of Zetheria. If you endure and prove your courage, you may continue. If you fall, your journey ends here." The gates at the far side of the arena opened. 3 alien warriors stepped out. They were taller than Ethan, their bodies clad in shimmering armor that seemed to pulse with energy. Each carried a weapon unlike anything he had seen, a staff with blades that glowed at both ends, humming with deadly power. The crowd roared. Many cheered for the warriors. Others jeered at Ethan, expecting his quick defeat. Ethan's throat felt dry. He had no armor, only simple protective cloth given to him by the palace guards. In his hands, they placed a short blade made of crystal. It looked fragile compared to the alien weapons, and it hummed faintly as though alive. He took a slow breath. "I'm not a soldier," he thought. "I'm an explorer. I fix ships, I study maps, I survive storms, but I don't fight." Still, he stepped into the arena. There was no choice. The fight begins. The first warrior moved quickly, spinning his staff with blinding speed. Ethan barely dodged the strike, the glowing blade cutting a line of fire across the stone floor where he had just stood. The second warrior pressed forward, aiming for Ethan's side. Ethan stumbled back, raising his crystal blade. The impact rang out like thunder as alien energy clashed with fragile human steel. His arms shook from the force, but somehow the crystal blade held. The crowd cheered, hungry for more. The third warrior circled behind him, closing the trap. Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't win by strength, he had none compared to them. He had to think differently. He dropped low suddenly, rolling across the ground. The third warrior's strike missed, clashing into his companion's weapon. Sparks, flew as the alien blades clashed against each other. Ethan scrambled to his feet, heart pounding. He slashed with his crystal blade, not at their bodies, but at the staff of the nearest warrior. The weapon cracked under the unexpected strike. The warrior pulled back in shock as the glowing blade flickered weakly. The crowd gasped. Ethan didn't pause. He darted toward the arena's wall, using the terrain for cover, forcing the other two warriors to adjust. He was slower, weaker, but he was unpredictable. The queen leaned forward slightly in her seat, her eyes never leaving him. The assassin's trick. But as the fight continued, something strange happened. The second warrior's movements grew sharper, deadlier, as if fueled by more than simple skill. His armor flickered with a red glow, different from the others. The queen's eyes narrowed. She whispered something to the guard at her side, but by then it was too late. The warrior lunged, his strike faster than before, unnaturally fast. Ethan barely raised his blade in time. The blow knocked him back, sending him crashing into the stone floor. Pain shot through his arm. The crowd gasped again, but this time the queen rose to her feet. "That power," she began, her voice sharp with anger. Hidden in the shadows of the noble seats, cloaked figures watched. One whispered, "Good. Let the human die. No one will question the trial." Ethan struggled to rise, his breath ragged. His blade hummed faintly in his hand. The warrior advanced, his armor glowing brighter with the strange red light. They've cheated, Ethan realized. They don't want me to just lose. They want me dead. He staggered aside as the strike came down, the blade carving a scar into the stone where he had stood. Desperation filled him. He couldn't fight them head-on, but maybe... His eyes darted to the cracked weapon of the first warrior, lying abandoned on the ground. He ran for it, rolling as another strike missed him by inches. He grabbed the broken staff, sparks dancing across his fingers. Turning quickly, he hurled it like a spear. The weapon flew straight into the glowing armor of the second warrior. The unstable energy inside the broken staff exploded on impact, sending the warrior stumbling back in a shower of sparks. The crowd roared in shock. The nobles in the shadows cursed under their breath. Ethan didn't wait. He charged at the third warrior, not with strength but with speed, slamming into him and knocking him off balance. With a quick strike, he cut the straps of the warrior's armor. The heavy plates fell away, leaving the alien exposed. The warrior yielded, raising his hand in surrender. The arena fell silent. Only two warriors stood, one weakened by the blast, the other still fighting. Ethan held his blade high, his chest heaving with exhaustion. His body ached, but his mind blazed with focus. He had survived longer than anyone expected. Victory and unease. The second warrior, his armor sparking, tried one final charge. Ethan sidestepped, using the alien's own momentum against him. With a twist, he brought the crystal blade down on the warrior's staff. The weapon shattered, and the warrior fell to his knees. Silence. The first warrior, whose weapon had been broken, earlier stepped forward. He bowed deeply to Ethan, then raised his arm high. It was the sign of respect and surrender. The court erupted in noise. Some shouted in disbelief, others in fury. The queen's expression softened, her lips curving into the faintest smile. "Yes, the trial is complete," the head counselor announced, though his voice carried a note of disbelief. "The human has proven his bravery." The crowd roared again, though this time their cheers were mixed with anger. Many nobles stood silently, their faces pale with frustration. Ethan staggered, his blade slipping from his hand. Guards rushed forward to steady him, but he waved them off. He wanted to stand on his own. He turned his gaze upward to the queen. Her violet eyes glowed brighter than ever. For the first time since he had arrived in this strange empire, Ethan thought he saw something almost human in her expression. Pride. The shadows plot. Again, that night, the palace was filled with whispers. Many nobles grumbled about the trials, saying luck had carried the human again. Others admitted grudgingly that he had shown courage none expected. But in the hidden chamber, the cloaked figures met again. Their voices were sharp with anger. He should have died. The plan failed. The queen grows stronger because of him. Then we must act before the third trial. If he survives again, she will win the court to her side. One figure leaned forward, his eyes glowing faintly red. The third trial will test his loyalty. We will use that moment. If we cannot kill him in the arena, we will destroy him with choice. Ethan lay in his chamber that night staring at the ceiling. His body throbbed with pain, his muscles screaming from the battle. He had survived, but just barely. Still, as he closed his eyes, he saw the Queen's face again. Her calm, her strength, her pride. For reasons he could not explain, he no longer wanted to fight only for survival. He wanted to fight for her. And deep down, he feared that the greatest danger was not the trials themselves, but the enemies waiting in the shadows. The palace of Zytheria never slept. Its towers glowed like stars through the endless night, energy fields humming in the air. Yet inside Ethan's chamber, silence pressed heavily on him. He lay awake on his bed, every muscle aching from the brutal fight in the arena. He had survived 2 trials, the puzzle of the mind and the battle of bravery. Against all odds, he had stood tall where others had expected him to fall. But survival did not bring him peace. Instead, it brought a storm of questions. Why had the Queen chosen him? What did she see that no one else did? And what was the third, also the one everyone whispered about but never explained? The door opened quietly. A familiar figure entered, the woman in white robes who had brought him food before. Her glowing blue eyes looked calm, but there was worry in her voice. "The Queen asked me to speak with you," she said. "Tomorrow, you face the final trial, the trial of loyalty." Ethan sat up slowly. "And what does that mean?" The woman lowered her gaze. "It means you will be given a choice. One path will free you, the other will bind you forever to this world." Ethan frowned. "Free me? You mean, let me go home?" She nodded. "Yes. If you choose to leave, you may return to your people, unharmed. But if you choose to stay, you will take up arms to defend Zytheria. And if you stay, you will never be the same again. You will no longer be a visitor. You will be one of us." Her words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Ethan leaned back, rubbing his temples. So that's their game, he thought. They want to see if I'll abandon them when things get hard. If I walk away, I prove their point, that humans are weak, selfish, and only look out for themselves. But if he stayed, he would be giving up everything. Earth, his ship, the quiet life he had dreamed of when he first left his home. The woman in white looked at him with sympathy. "Choose carefully, human, for this choice cannot be undone." The storm approaches. The next morning, the palace shook with alarms. The air was tense, filled with hurried footsteps and shouted orders. Guards rushed down corridors, generals barked, commands and the hum of warships filled the skies above. Ethan was escorted to the Great Hall, where the court had gathered once more. The Queen stood tall before her throne, her violet eyes blazing like fire. "The Empire is under attack," she declared. "The Dravari fleet moves against us. They strike our borders even as we speak. Their warships march toward our capital." A murmur of fear spread through the nobles. The Dravari were a rival race, known for their cruelty and hunger for conquest. To face them was to risk destruction. The head counselor turned sharply toward Ethan. His voice rang with cold authority. "Then let the trial begin. Human Ethan Ward, your loyalty will be tested not in words but in action. You may leave this world and return to your people, safe from the coming war, or you may stand with us, knowing that death may be the price." The court waited, breathless. Some nobles smirked, already sure of his choice. "He will run," their eyes seemed to say. "No human will die for us." The conspirators in the shadows smiled. If Ethan chose to leave, the Queen would be shamed. If he chose to stay and died in battle, the problem solved itself. To them, it was a perfect trap. The choice Ethan stood in the center of the hall, every eye burning into him. His heart hammered in his chest. The offer of freedom was tempting. To return to Earth, to leave behind the chaos of alien politics and the weight of impossible trials. It was everything he had once wanted. But then he looked up at the Queen. She stood proud, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of emotion. Fear not for herself, but for her people. For her empire. For him. Ethan remembered the puzzle box, the way his hands had found a path where no alien mind could. He remembered the arena, where he had survived not through strength, but through resourcefulness. And he remembered the whispers of the nobles who wanted him gone, dead or disgraced. He took a deep breath and raised his voice so all could hear. "If I leave now, I prove you all right," he said. "I prove that humans are selfish, that we only care for ourselves. But I didn't survive the trials just to walk away. If I stay, I prove something else, that humans can stand with others, that we can fight for more than just ourselves." He looked at the Queen and nodded once. "I stay." The court erupted in chaos. Some shouted in fury, others stared in shock. But the Queen's eyes softened, glowing brighter than ever. "So be it," she said, her voice carrying above the storm. "The human chooses loyalty. Then let him fight beside us. Command of a fleet." The generals protested immediately. "He cannot lead, he has no training. He is untested in war. This is madness." But the Queen silenced them with a wave of her hand. "He has proven what none of you expected. I give him command. Not of our grand fleet, but of a squadron. Let him show what his loyalty truly means." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Command? I don't even know your technology," he admitted. The Queen met his gaze steadily. "Then, use your own. Sometimes the mind of a stranger sees paths that those within cannot. Trust yourself, Ethan Ward. And trust that I do." Her words steadied him. He nodded slowly. Within hours, Ethan found himself aboard a Zetherian warship, its halls alive with glowing panels and humming engines. Alien officers saluted him, though their eyes held doubt. They followed orders only because the Queen commanded it. As his squadron of ships launched into the stars, Ethan sat in the command chair, staring at the glowing display of enemy fleets approaching. His hands shook slightly, but his mind focused. "Can't fight like them," he thought, "but maybe I don't need to." The human strategy. The Dravari fleet was massive, their ships dark and jagged, like predators cutting through space. The Zetherian forces moved with elegance and discipline, their ships glowing like blades of light. But the enemy outnumbered them 2-1. The nobles in the court, watching through the palace's projection screens, whispered that the battle was already lost. The conspirators smiled, certain the human would be crushed. But Ethan studied the enemy movements with sharp eyes. He noticed something others did not. The Dravari ships moved in rigid patterns, predictable and mechanical. He remembered his days, on Earth, playing old naval simulations where weaker fleets could outmaneuver stronger ones by striking at their blind spots. "Break formation," he ordered suddenly. The alien officers gasped. "Break formation? That is against all tactics of war." "Do it," Ethan said firmly. "Scatter wide, then regroup on my signal. Trust me." Reluctantly, they obeyed. The squadron split apart, dodging enemy fire as the Dravari ships moved. To pursue. "Now circle them," Ethan shouted. The Zetherian ships curved around, weaving patterns the enemy did not expect. They struck not at the strongest points, but at the weak joints of the enemy's fleet, disrupting their formation. One Dravari ship after another faltered, colliding with each other in the confusion. The court, watching, gasped in shock. "Impossible," whispered a general. "No one has ever broken their formations like this." But Ethan smiled grimly. "Humans don't always fight stronger. We fight smarter." The turning tide, the squadron's daring maneuvers gave the larger Zetherian fleet the chance it needed. Inspired by the human's unexpected tactics, other commanders adapted, breaking tradition and copying his moves. The battlefield shifted. What had begun as certain defeat turned into a struggle, and then into hope. The Dravari, unused to such chaos, began to falter. From the palace balcony, Queen Seraphira watched with pride. Her gamble had paid off. Ethan had done what no one else dared, break their rigid traditions and use something new. But in the shadows of the court, the conspirators fumed. Their plan had failed again. The human had not only survived, he had led them to victory. Aftermath, when the Dravari fleet finally retreated, the skies above Zytheria lit with cheers and celebration. Ships returned battered but triumphant. Ethan stepped off his warship, exhausted but alive. The court gathered once more. The head counselor announced, his voice heavy with disbelief, "The human has passed the third trial. His loyalty is proven." The hall was filled with mixed voices, cheers, protests, arguments. But no one could deny what had happened. Ethan looked up at the Queen. She smiled faintly, pride clear in her eyes. For the first time, he felt that he truly belonged, not as a prisoner, not as a guest, but as someone who had earned his place. Yet in the shadows, the conspirators whispered, their darkest plan yet. If trials could not kill him, perhaps betrayal would. The sun of Zytheria rose slowly over the crystalline towers of the palace, painting the sky in soft shades of violet and gold. The city below stirred with anticipation. Word had spread throughout the empire. The human, Ethan Ward, had survived every trial. He had faced the impossible and had proven himself in ways no one could have imagined. Inside the grand throne room, preparations were underway for a ceremony unlike any seen in living memory. Nobles and dignitaries from every corner of Zytheria gathered, their robes flowing like rivers of color. Generals, still recovering from the chaos of the recent battle, stood in their polished armor. Scholars carried glowing tablets, recording every detail of history in the making. Ethan stood at the entrance of the throne room, his hands clasped tightly. He had walked through the halls countless times over the past weeks, but never had he felt the weight of expectation as he did now. Every step toward the throne made him feel smaller, yet somehow stronger. Queen Seraphira descended from her throne, her presence commanding and serene. The violet glow of her eyes met Ethan's, and in that instant, all the noise of the court faded from his mind. He remembered the first moment he had stood before her, the shock of her confession, the trials, and the dangers he had faced. Now, all of it led to this moment, the final challenge. The head counselor stepped forward, his expression neutral, but his eyes betraying surprise and concern. "Before the union may be recognized, the court demands one final confirmation," he said. "Human Ethan Ward, do you willingly accept this role, knowing all it entails? Are you prepared to stand not only as consort to the Queen, but as a partner in leadership of our empire?" Ethan nodded. "I am," he said, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "I have faced trials, and I have chosen loyalty and courage. I accept the responsibilities, and I accept the Queen." A murmur swept through the court. Some nobles were silent in awe. Others whispered in disbelief. A few glared, unable to hide their anger. But the Queen raised her hand, and silence fell, instantly. "Let it be known," she declared, "that Ethan Ward, a human, has earned his place by courage, wisdom, and loyalty. He shall stand beside me, not as a visitor, but as partner, as consort, and as protector of our people, acceptance and respect." For a long moment, the court was silent, absorbing the weight of her words. Then, one by one, nobles stepped forward to show respect. Some bowed deeply, others offered formal greetings, their voices filled with reluctant admiration. Even the generals who had doubted him at first nodded, acknowledging that his strategies had saved the empire. In the shadows, the conspirators seethed. Their plans to remove or discredit him had failed. The trials had strengthened. His position and the Queen's trust in him was absolute. There was no path left for betrayal, at least not without open rebellion, which none dared attempt. Ethan, standing before the Queen, felt a rush of emotions: pride, relief, and something deeper, a sense of belonging he had never known. He reached out, and the Queen's hand met his, her touch gentle yet firm. "You have done more than survive," she whispered. "You have proven that humanity can rise to greatness." He looked at her. the weight of his words and actions settling into reality. And you've shown me that courage is not just in strength, but in choosing to do what is right even when it is hard. The ceremony. The chamber was transformed for the Union. Lights shimmered along the walls, highlighting the crystal architecture. Flowers, both earthly and alien, filled the air with gentle fragrance. Music, soft and melodic, echoed through the hall, played by Zetherian musicians who had never before performed for such an event. Queen Seraphira stepped forward and extended her hand. "Ethan Ward," she said, "do you accept me as your partner, in times of peace and times of challenge, as companion and protector?" Ethan bowed his head and took her hand firmly. "I do," he replied, his voice carrying through the hall. She smiled, and a wave of violet light emanated from her, touching the gathered nobles and warriors. It was a traditional blessing, a sign of her approval, and the sacred bond now formed. The counselor, still composed but clearly moved, spoke next. "By the authority of the Empire and by the choice of our queen, this union is recognized. Let all remember this day as the moment a human became one with Zetheria, not by birth but by merit, courage, and loyalty." The chamber erupted in applause. Some clapped with genuine admiration, others with reluctance, but all recognized that history had been made. A quiet moment. After the formal ceremony, the Queen led Ethan to the balcony overlooking the city. The tower sparkled in the morning light, and ships glided through the sky, still celebrating the victory of the recent battle. "Do you realize what you've done?" she asked softly. "You've not only survived the trials, you've changed the court, the Empire, and perhaps even how humans are seen in the galaxy." Ethan looked out at the city, the lights reflecting in his eyes. "I never wanted power," he admitted. "I just wanted to do what was right." The Queen nodded. "And that is why I chose you. Courage and loyalty are rare even among those born into greatness. You earned more than my choice. You earned respect, and you've earned your place beside me." Ethan turned to her. "Then I will stand by you, in every battle, every challenge, every choice." Her violet eyes softened, and she reached out to touch his cheek gently. "Then let us face the future together." Shadows of conspiracy, even as the city celebrated, the defeated conspirators in the court met one final time. Their whispers were filled with anger and frustration. "He survived," one hissed. "He bested every trial. And now the Queen trusts him," another growled. "We have no path left to oppose him without war." A third figure, older and cunning, finally spoke. "Perhaps we have underestimated him. The human is not just clever, he is something more. If we act now, we risk the wrath of the Queen and the people. We must wait and watch." Though they plotted still, it was clear that their influence had waned. Ethan's courage, his loyalty, and the Queen's trust had fortified his position. For now, the Empire accepted him. A new beginning. The palace filled with celebration. Nobles, generals, and citizens alike came to honor the Union. Music, laughter, and chatter echoed through the halls. Ethan, once a stranger, now moved among the people as someone respected and admired. The Queen stood beside him, her hand lightly resting on his arm. Together they addressed the gathered court. "We face a future full of challenges," she said. "But together we will rise, not just as queen and consort, but as partners. And perhaps together, we will show the galaxy what courage, loyalty, and humanity can achieve." Ethan felt a warmth in his chest he had never known. He had come from a small planet, lost and unsure, and now he stood as a part of something greater than he had ever imagined. He had faced impossible odds, and he had chosen to stay when it mattered most. Now, with the Queen by his side, he understood that this was only the beginning. Together, they would face enemies, challenges, and discoveries, not as ruler and human, but as partners. And for the first time, Ethan felt the full weight and the full joy of being truly alive in a universe far bigger than Earth, far bigger than himself. Closing scene as the celebrations continued. Ethan and the Queen retreated to a quiet terrace overlooking the sparkling city. The light of the twin suns reflected in their eyes. "You were right," Ethan said softly. "Courage isn't just about strength, it's about standing for something bigger than yourself." The Queen smiled. "And loyalty is not about obedience, it is about choice, even when the hardest path is before you. You have both, Ethan. That is why you belong here." Ethan took her hand, holding it firmly. "Then let us face whatever comes together." And as the stars of Zetheria shone above them, a human and an alien queen stood side by side, united by trust, courage, and the unbreakable bond forged through trials, battle, and choice. The Empire had witnessed history. Humanity had taken its first step into a greater galaxy, not by conquest but by bravery, wisdom, and loyalty. And Ethan Ward, the human who had once been a stranger, was no longer an outsider. He was part of Zetheria,